Alright, there we go now. You'll be seeing a number of things here and there as I switch between two different tabs. I don't have my third monitor up here. Apparently got messed up when I was cleaning it. Oh, did not mean to have that be playing there. So, yeah, occasionally you'll see this, but for the most part you're just going to be seeing this because I have to switch to my chat to see if Jackie Chan THORula in particular is going to be, well, going to be responding there. Oh, okay, here we go. Yeah, he's just responded, so hopefully he'll show up in the chat there, and I'll occasionally see what his responses are. But anyways, I'm not above criticizing someone like MauLer. MauLer in particular can get really irritating at times. He will, from time to time, of course, pretend that he is a fan of a series when in fact he's only a pop culture fan of a given series. And whenever he does that, he has this weird tendency to say, this is not true to the characters or whatever, or this is a character assassination, and blah de blah de blah. When, like, he will deny having even had looked at source material, or even saying that, nah, source material isn't required for this kind of stuff, or you shouldn't have to read source material. While at the same time referencing source material to, like, say why it's bad. It's just really weird to see him do this, especially from the perspective of like an objective criticism, which it's like that's not objective. Come on, seriously, you know. But when it comes to his critiques of any given movie, specifically ones that are involving, oh, I don't know, shall we say, poor writing issues that are structured, not all that are structured fairly poorly, things that ignore context and contextual writing in the sense in which you're supposed to actually, oh, I don't know, oh, okay, looks like that does kind of show up. In fact, let me go and adjust something here real quick. Hold on. Just bring this window over here. See if I can go ahead and include. Oops, hold on. No, that's not the right key. Bit there. Hold on. Oh yeah, Alt. Yeah. Okay, I can switch over this tab and see who's like doing so, responding to me. Seems like a little bit of work. Obviously it won't work though, so I gotta go ahead and bring it back here. Just doing a bit of a small little thing there. But yeah, that's a bit of an issue there. At least when it comes to MauLer and his whole shtick of why it is that he doesn't like movies. But when it comes down to it, like, when he's able to actually like express himself as a fan of the series or whatever, not from the perspective of a pop culture fan, but rather from the perspective of someone who, well, let's be honest here, knows his shit and knows what the fuck he's talking about, he's pretty good. And when it comes to Star Wars, I get the feeling that while he hasn't really read anything with regards to the EU, that he has probably, at the very least, like taken his criticisms into consideration in that regard. And his criticism of people using third-party sources and third-party media to fill in the blanks, if you would, of what happens in a standalone trilogy, or what is supposed to be a standalone trilogy, are pretty damn good reasonings. I mean, the source material for Star Wars, when it comes to the EU, is supposed to enhance the initial experience, not necessarily take away from it. And it's supposed to complement the stories, in a sense, not rely on them for like giving us backdrop of information. Like, we shouldn't have to read the Disney canon, for example, to get why it is that Kylo is acting the way in which he is, and what his significant like connection is to Vader, beyond the fact that he's a bit of a Vader fanboy, if you would. You know, these kinds of things shouldn't have to have third-party material and sources, and he's right in that regard. And I would like to think that Jackie Chan THORula, or rather I'll call him Film God nowadays, because like he's picked up like I think 2 different names prior to this one, so it's like, man, come on, pick a name. But I like to think that he agrees with me on this. However, he does share my irritation with MauLer in regards to the DCU and the types of criticisms they'll make, so I'm willing to be more fair than not. But these criticisms made me wonder, is he fucking drunk when he did this? No, seriously, is he? Let's check it out here.
And quite famous criticism to check out regarding this scene. The most destructive moment for anything character or plot related is, of course...
Apologies for the poor audio quality here. My headset is starting to go a little bit wonky, if you would. I have to buy another one. So yeah, I'm going to be doing that at some point. Anyways, this MauLer's approach in general, silly, scary voice that sounds intelligent but misses tons of knowledge of the lore. I'm not entirely too sure what lore has to be relevant to the criticism that he's making here, in the sense that we should have gotten some more development of Rey's powers and abilities and how they were presented, if you would. Because, and he's going to bring in, like, you know, quote-unquote lore up, but he fucks it all up in such a way that makes it impossible to, like, not acknowledge. In fact, the reason why I'm doing this response is because of these giant lore fuck-ups that he does. But continuing.
The most destructive moment for anything character or plot related is, of course, Rey defeating Kylo in the Force mind torture reading thingy. I have no idea what I'm supposed...
The resistance to the mind probe is considerable. It'll be some time before we can extract any information from her. The final checkout is completed. All systems are operational. What course shall we set? Perhaps she would respond to an alternative form of persuasion. What do you mean? Star Wars original, Leia also resisted Vader. He apparently forgot or is just lying. Well, we aren't really given any information as to what it is that he has done. Like, we don't... Like, let's watch that scene real quick, because I distinctly remember the mind-controlling scene. Hold on. Original trilogy, Vader, mind control. Let's see. See if we can look at this little scene here real quick. Darth Vader interrogates the princess. Let's look it up. The quality of the video is shit, but that's not the point. The point is the dialogue. Very shitty quality.
And now, Your Highness, we will discuss the location of your hidden rebel base.
Oh look, the probe. Oops, not sure why the fuck that popped up. Well, in the video, because, you know, but not sure why they would actually put that there anyways. Nice, sorry about that, just checking the notification, seeing if I got anything of, like, I'm commenting or whatever, but, yeah, I'm not drunk at all, I'm just making a response video to an autistic beaver. So, yeah, it seems like Vader uses the mind probe on Leia. Doesn't really do anything in that regard. So let's find out where this dialogue is coming from here. Because I don't remember this particular bit of dialogue here. Let's see here. Hold on. Let's just go ahead and do this. I'd rather... Yeah. Okay. Mind probe is considerable. It'll be some time before we can extract any information from her. See if I can see the scene. Oh, wait. Are you referring... Oh, my God. Shit. Are you fucking kidding me here? Okay, so I know exactly where this scene comes from here. It comes from the scene in which they're talking about and discussing... Hold on for a second. Let me just show it, rather. Darth Vader discussing Leia with Tarkin. Scene. Let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, because after that scene, he comes into the chamber with the drone, indicating that she resisted the mind probe, but likely can't resist what Vader is doing to her. Which, given the fact that it's a needle and whatnot that we're seeing, indicates to me that he's using a combination of force persuasion and mind drugs, which is not the same thing that he uses on that. But let's go ahead and get to the point here. Here we go. Yeah, so this is what it is that I'm referring to here for a second. Let's see here real quick. Let me make sure that this is coming along just fine. Okay then. Have to take this tab out. Move it over to here. Man, these fucking Opera is real finicky, but it's the only place I can actually play my games while watching videos and not having to perfect my performance, because Google is fucking ass in terms of performance. So yeah. Doesn't seem to be updating. There we go.
Her resistance to the mind probe is considerable. It'll be some time before we can extract any information from her.
The final checkout is completed. All systems are operational. What course shall we set?
Perhaps she would respond to an alternative form of persuasion.
What do you mean?
I think it is time we demonstrated the full power of this station. Set your course for Alderaan.
Okay. So I was incorrect here. My bad. I was misremembering the sequence of events. This comes after the mind probe that we just saw, and this particular event, quite literally, has Tarkin responding to Vader in this regard, and Vader says, "What do you mean?" And then it's like, oh, okay, so we're going to see the destruction of Alderaan. In fact, let's go ahead and watch it a little bit further here.
Our scout ships have reached Tatooine. They found the remains of a rebel base, but they estimate that it has been deserted for some time. They are now conducting an extensive search of the surrounding systems.
She lied. She lied to us.
Yep.
I told you she would never consciously betray the rebellion.
Terminate her immediately.
Yes?
Okay, so it cuts off to a completely different scene, and obviously over to the Battle of Yavin here.
We've captured a freighter entering the remains of the
Or,
Alderaan system.
oh, they're capturing the freighter. Okay, yeah, they're just jumping around all over the place. I hate it when fucking videos do that when I'm trying to look shit up. Anyways, yeah, so this is not Vader talking. Hold on. Make sure it's, yeah, okay. So, yeah, this is not Vader. This text right here, her resistance to the mind probe is considerable. That's Vader talking. This is Tarkin. I mean, this is the hand guy. This is Tarkin here. And this is Vader. So, like, what the fuck are you talking about exactly? Like, when you look this stuff up, this is not exactly what happens. I mean, I may have mangled the sequence of events, but at the very least, I didn't suggest that someone was talking when they weren't. I mean, did you get this? Did you look up this information from, like, I don't know, how what? Like, he didn't resist Leia because he used a mind probe on him. In fact, like, Vader was talking about how much she resisted the mind probe. And if what I said is true, if he used like a combination of force persuasion and the mind probe, like, that's interesting. And that would be something I would have to look at the novel for, if they give any kind of description like that. but there's no indication whatsoever within the context of the movie in and of itself that does this. Maybe the novel brings it up. Should have been in the movie to a large degree, but it's a nice little piece of information that we can now glean from now the fact that the series is done, and we know that Leia is Force sensitive, so now we have like little bitty callbacks here and there. So, yeah, what the heck are you talking about here?
Supposed to call it, but Kylo, who has been trained by the greatest powers on both sides of the Force in the galaxy, managed to be out.
First, some warnings. This discussion will cover all Star Wars films, so alas.
So MauLer has returned with another part of his alleged The Force Awakens critique. I knew this was coming.
Okay, there's a lot of text in here I have to read here and maybe respond to. To clarify on this issue, in this section, the issue is the Rey scene where she does a mind trick and MauLer has already vented like a fool and is running through and dismissing possible explanations. We begin there and I respond. Okay.
I will try to do some improved videos. I do take the feedback seriously, but frankly, he isn't laying out a critique in any real sense. It's just a bunch of babbling, and as we're going to show, it's a lot of hypocritical babbling at that. So he's going to try to show that there is a huge canonical violation with how Rey is using her powers in a key scene.
Hold on, I'm going to see if maybe there's... I want to check something real quick in my sound settings here for a second. Go down. Go ahead and lower this. Oh, okay, it was at 4800. So let's go and up it real quick, see if that's going on there. That will help.
Near the end of Force Awakens. But if we think it through carefully, no, you haven't proved anything at all.
Nah, it's actually worse, so let me go back there. Back. Let me just go over to here real quick. Still studio quality.
Rey hasn't been given any training whatsoever. She has no idea what a...
Yeah, it's a headset. It's a headset there, so, you know.
Rey is using her powers in a... We're going to show it's a lot of hypocritical babbling at that. So he's going to try to show that there is a huge canonical violation with how Rey is using her powers in a key scene near the end of Force Awakens. But if we think it through carefully, no, you haven't proved anything at all.
It is a joke because Rey hasn't been given any training whatsoever. She has no idea what a Jedi is, let alone a mind trick. Most of them get some...
Right, Han telling her about the Jedi. Oh, whoops, not fitting the we must all hate JJ and Ryan agenda. Okay, let me go ahead and explain it, obviously, because this is a little bit strange as a point of criticism here. First of all, he just says that the Jedi and that kind of stuff are all real. Like, okay, well, what does that mean to Rey? Rey knows all about Han Solo, but she believes that the Jedi are a myth, like Han Solo used to believe. Now, what does that necessarily mean that she thought it was a myth? Well, given her background and given everything that we know about her as a character, that we would come to understand that she means it in a sort of dismissive manner. Because what would she have any use for that of the stories of the Jedi? Would they inspire her? Well, no, not necessarily. I mean, her situation more or less means that she doesn't have the ability or the means by which to become inspired in that sense. Because, you know, she's a slave. She's probably even worse than a slave in a lot of ways. But it's also important to understand that that this is someone who would be hearing stories about the Jedi and would dismiss them out of hand because they don't hold any kind of relevancy to who she is, where she is, and what she's doing. You know, what reason would she have to latch onto stories about Jedi Knights roaming the galaxy, protecting the world from the evil empire that exists, and while at the same time, like, knowing about these magical and fantastic abilities? Whereas with Han Solo, on the other hand, she would identify with him a lot more because he's a smuggler, he's a rogue, he's someone who has beaten the odds and has come out on top, and to a large degree became the better for it. It's an inspiring notion, an inspiring message in that sense. And I think, or rather I tend to believe that that when it comes down to it, there is a lot of interesting ideas and interesting ways in which she can relate to to the character of Han Solo, as opposed to what, the Jedi? How many Jedi are there? How many stories are there? Do they exist? Like, what stories would she have heard exactly? Would she have heard the baby kidnapping stories or whatever? Probably not. Would she have probably heard about the whole the Clone Wars? Probably, but the Clone Wars to her would be like history. It would be a generation ago to her, and she wouldn't have any way in which to relate to that other than the fact that they're somewhat in the same situation that they are now. So yeah, it's kind of hard for me to sort of take this a little seriously at all, especially given the fact that, well, you know, she likely wouldn't remember any of those myths. I mean, the myths that we hear about other people and whatnot, about other beings and all that stuff, usually stick with us when they're inspiring to some degree. With Rey, she would just know or have a similar attitude towards the Jedi when she thinks of even them less than Solo does, in the sense that they don't even exist. They're not even worth thinking about. They're not even worth contemplating about in her view. Whereas Solo, on the other hand, Han Solo, he's worth contemplating about because he's inspiring. So yeah, we have to ask these questions when we're giving these sorts of critiques and these sorts of considerations. Her being told that the Jedi are real doesn't really do anything in that regard. And not to mention seeing the trick being done, being able to, doesn't translate in you being able to do it. So yeah.
Form of a primer or guide to their power, but Rey somehow decided she could pull this off.
Hold on, let's listen to that again real quick.
Force Awakens. But if we think it through carefully, no, you haven't proved anything at all.
It is a joke because Rey hasn't been given any training whatsoever. She has no idea what a Jedi is, let alone a mind trick. Most of them get some form of a primer or guide to their power.
Well, knowing the existence of the Jedi and that they exist and that there are stories about them doesn't give you a full understanding of what they actually are, in a sense. For her, the context would be, oh, there are people with special powers and abilities, and they go around helping the galaxy. Oh, great. Oh, they did this ability. I don't care. I'm too busy, trying to get scraps of material of ship parts to be able to survive. What would I care? What would be the reasoning for that?
But Rey somehow decided she could pull this off when it would only have made sense if she was a part of the audience having seen the prior movies. The third argument is sad. There are people who think Rey escaping the villain's custody with an ability we have no reason to think she would even have is great writing because it's explained in some book you need to buy additional to the film. You know, when third-party information explains what IG-88, Captain Phasma, and Jango Fett got up to when they weren't involved with the protagonists, that's fine. In fact, it's awesome if those are well-written stories. But when the third-party information is required for the plot to make any sense, then your story no longer functions as a story. The fourth argument is one of convenience, and I think if you're in favor of powerful and incredibly useful contrivances in addition to the ones we've already had acting like a plague on this script, then just one more isn't going to affect your viewing experience. Though, without knowing anything about it, why would someone just assume they can control people's minds? Seems to me like a stretch. And the final argument is referencing episode 5. But it doesn't apply. Luke had training, the Force was explained to him, and Luke was in a position of reaching for the lightsaber and through his stress, made it move with the Force. Telekinesis was also precedented. Regardless, it's a much more intuitive way to access that power within that universe as opposed to randomly trying out whether you can mind control people because why not? And it makes a whole lot more sense when you think about what Obi-Wan told Luke.
Let go your conscious self and act on instinct. Stretch out with your feelings.
In conclusion, this scene humiliates the idea of training, hollows the journey of a Jedi, relies on third-party media, and encourages conveniences once again while ignoring the many rules of the originals.
So the problem here is
Wait.
he's assuming...
Ah, okay, I wasn't aware that that guy was, like, right there. Well, okay, I'm going to go ahead and redo this turn then.
The issue is...
By the way, for those of you who are wondering why it is I'm, like, doing that, it's because I'm doing an extensive mod test. I have a shit ton of mods running in the background. In fact, I have 674, to be exact. So, yeah, that's why the video looks a little bit... looks basically pretty fucking laggy the way in which it does, but... Anyways.
There's an established rule. This is violating the established rule. The established rule is training. The problem is that only comes in the later half of episode 5. In episode 4, and even the beginning of episode 5, that is not an established rule. It's Empire Strikes Back that has this established rule. So we have a problem because if Luke could use Force abilities before the established rule is explicit, then Luke also violated the rule. Not to mention Anakin and Phantom Menace. He also violates the rule. He didn't receive any explicit training. He destroys the whole space station. It appears he's either making this up, which George Lucas, to be fair, did too. He just made it up out of nowhere, saying...
Wait, are you making things up and, like, expecting me to, like, not call you out on it? Holy crap, man. This is, like, really bad. Hold on, let's, bring this back up here real quick. I hit the wrong button there. So yeah, let's bring this up here, shall we? Luke training with Ben Kenobi.
Are you all right? What's wrong?
I felt a great disturbance in the Force, as if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced. I fear something terrible has happened. You better get on with your exercises.
Well, you can forget your troubles with those Imperial slugs. I told you I'd outrun them.
Wookie, arms no.
I suggest a new strategy.
Remember, a Jedi can feel the Force flowing through him.
You mean it controls your actions?
Partially, but it also obeys your commands.
Hokey religions and ancient weapons are no match for a good blaster at your side, kid.
You don't believe in the Force, do you?
Kid, I've flown from one side of this galaxy to the other. I've seen a lot of strange stuff, but I've never seen anything to make me believe there's one all-powerful force controlling everything. There's no mystical energy field controls my destiny. It's all a lot of simple tricks and nonsense.
I suggest you try it again, Luke. This time, let go your conscious self and act on instinct.
With the blast shield down, I can't even see. How am I supposed to fight?
Your eyes can deceive you. Don't trust them. Stretch out with your feelings. See? You can do it.
I call it luck.
In my experience, there's no such thing as luck.
Look, good against remotes is one thing. Good against the living, it's something else.
He's got a point there, but let's go ahead and use a bit of contrast here real quick, just to gather my point a little bit home further here.
Rebel base, 30 seconds.
Hang on, I'll
This one. Luke, trust me.
So he's foregoing the machinery, trusting his instincts and whatnot, just like we saw beforehand. And we saw that because of the training there beforehand, he was able to do this. This is not in episode 5 or the latter part of episode 5. This is like in the earlier parts, or in the middle part rather. I mean, sorry, in the earlier part, or straight up in the near around the middle. Does he actually get the training here? So I'm not sure what exactly it is you're talking about here, because it makes no motherfucking sense to actually have this as a thing here. So yeah, it's like, what the fuck are you on about, huh? What? Hold on for a second. I'm gonna go ahead and So yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, did you make that point up just to like bang on about MauLer like missing stuff? Because it seems like this is a giant miss. I mean, you couldn't have done this unless you were just going off memory and you were purely drunk. So, you know, I mean, I went off memory. I got some stuff wrong, but for the most part, I'm like, and I'm not drunk. So, what's the deal here? Did you? I mean, I don't know. You do sound a little bit strange in this video.
And quite famous critics.
Oh, great. So let's see here. Go back a little bit here real quick.
And it just.
This is only any established rule. So we have a established rule. It's Empire Strikes Back that has this established rule. So we have a problem because if Luke could use Force abilities before the established rule is explicit, then Luke also violated the rule. Not to mention...
The established rule is pretty explicit in the first movie. He does what he does in with the Death Star because he had that little amount of training. And not to mention what he does in Empire Strikes Back with the lightsaber. There is, I think, a 3-year gap. Hold on. The time. How long is there a time between A New Hope, and Empire Strikes Back? Okay, yeah, so it's 3 years, just like I thought. Some more lighting over in here. Yeah. So, yeah, we have 3 years apart here. And during that 3-year period, by the way, and like material that came out pretty damn soon. In fact, it's like some of the first material that was put out there was to explain how Luke did that. And apparently we find out that Ben left a lot of material, a lot of training material in particular, with in his hut, through which Luke eventually returns to. And that's what he does. He returns there to get the training information and the training stuff that Ben left him, because he was intending to train him even further and teach him a lot more. And he ended up studying and training during that time. So, like, it's very clear that training is an endemic point in there, and that was a point that was brought up, I think, in 1992. I don't remember what book it was from, though, but hold on, let me go. I was actually asking about this earlier here. Let me just go ahead and scroll through my... Let's go ahead and scroll through my logs for a second. Weird. Okay, it would have to be in this one then, I think. The Rebellion era. Yeah, here we go. This is where it's at. Let's see, here's training. Oh yeah, that's another thing as well. I went through the radio dramas as well, and apparently Luke has almost a preternatural skill um, with piloting, just like his father does. In fact, it's showcased in the original, and the not the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, that the ability to have somewhat like Jedi-like reflexes, zapping, the ability to react to things as if you've seen them beforehand, before they happen, is like one of the most basic abilities that you get as a Force user that almost anyone can tap into instinctually. But that doesn't mean that you have the ability to be able to, for example, manipulate minds. That's not an implication that's made throughout any of this stuff. And I think it's a little bit insulting that you would, I don't know, make such a huge deal out of this in such a way that indicates not necessarily dishonesty, but just bias on your part, bias against MauLer, which I can totally understand. Okay, I can understand being biased against him because there are things that he says that are really, really bad and are really, really just dumb. That it gives the impression that almost everything that he says is dumb and bad, which is not the case. So let's go and continue here.
Anakin and Phantom Menace, he also violates the rule. He didn't receive any.
Anakin does not violate the rule whatsoever. Holy fucking Christ. What the hell are you talking about? This is what I mean by being drunk as all hell. Like, what the fuck?
Explicit training, he destroys the whole space station. It appears he's either making...
R2 is piloting the fucking craft that he's in. Like, what? Like, he destroys the space station, sure, by accident for the most part, or you could say that the Force is wielding him, but he's like a literal prophecy child, so I think that could be like forgiven, given that detail. But also if he did, let's say for example, destroyed it by accident, you know, it wasn't the Force using it, we could say that R2-D2 was helping him pilot the thing for the most part, and Anakin, while piloting it to some degree, wasn't really effectively piloting it for the vast majority of the thing. The autopilot, for example, is distinctively put forth as, or at the very least, distinctively suggested as being something separate from the droid piloting it. And we know that because there are three different systems. There's the system that the human focuses on, there's the autopilot system, and then there's the droid piloting system. So it's like, what? Also, like, I think it's heavily implied that speeders or rather not speeders, pod racing and controlling an actual aircraft that goes up in the air is similar enough to where in which the various different things would probably which the various different systems and controls would translate to one another. So yeah, it's like, why is this even a criticism? I barely understand it.
Making this up, which George Lucas, to be fair, did too. He just made it up out of nowhere, saying, "Well, we have to go through this Dagobah."
You can make up something without it. Let's continue.
Which George Lucas, to be fair, did too. He just made it up out of nowhere, saying, "Well, we have to go through this Dagobah training." Really? When? How? Why? He just made it up. So it's not really a real rule.
Well, like, let's think about it real quick. Where would he have to go in order to get Jedi training or further Jedi training? He already has Ben's stuff or whatever, so what can he do? Well, he can go to a Jedi Master, but most of them are dead. Most of them are gone. In fact, like, only 2 are literally remaining. Yoda, Obi-Wan's instructor, and maybe commune with Ben's Force Ghost a little bit more to get more training. But all he can really do is offer you advice and instructions. He can't physically train you. He can't physically help you in the sense of, oh, you need to do this move. Ooh, like, that wouldn't be very well. And not to mention, he would also need distinctive lessons in philosophy and idealisms and various other things that connect the Jedi to who they are. Which, like, Obi-Wan can technically do, but he would be much more effective if it was in physical person. He created the rule as a means of having us be introduced further to the Jedi ways, and without, like, Ben constantly holding his hand. Also, not to mention, Force Ghosts can't exactly use the Force, at least until the sequel trilogy, and specifically with The Last Jedi. So he would need Luke would need demonstrations onto what is possible, and since Ben can't do that, he needs those demonstrations. There's like a lot of reasons why it is that he invented the rule, beyond the fact that he just invented up the rule. He made it up, and also, not to mention, why is Lucas making something up a point for you and against MauLer when like Lucas making it up is like in the second movie, and you're allowed to make stuff up if you're just creating a sort of series that you're creating like as you go along. You're allowed to change your mind as well in certain situations. You know, Decker Kane and no, not Decker Kane. What was his name again? The main protagonist in Blade Runner, for example. It's suggested to a lot of people that he's a replicant. He's not a replicant. And the director says, okay, I've changed my mind. I actually don't want it to be an open question. I want him to be a replicant. So, yeah. I think you're allowed to do that as a film creator. But when you're playing with other people's universes, when you're playing with other people's work, you should at the very least be respectful for what came beforehand. And that was what MauLer is kind of getting at here. Like, they want to have their cake, but they don't want to put any of the work into the fucking cake in order to be able to have it. It's like the equivalent of having flour, milk, eggs, all this stuff to make a cake, but instead of making the cake, you just eat the ingredients and call it a cake. That's not a cake. You didn't put any of the work into creating a cake. Your stomach will not churn everything together to make it into a cake. What the fuck are you doing?
So how much training do you need to be a Force user is not really explained in Episode 4. And we can use Episode 4 in many ways because Luke...
As you just saw, that's a lie. We saw that is just a flat-out, bold-faced fucking lie.
Luke does use Force powers. I mean, he destroys the entire Death Star.
And by the way, the lie, for all intents and purposes, is saying something that the person is saying that is not only not true, but also that the fact of the matter is that they could have taken a few seconds just to double check their stuff to find out if it's not true, but they say it anyways. Well, probably knowing it's not true. This is sort of the probability of the thing, one which I highly doubt that when he wrote this script or when he made this video, he didn't go back and say, wait a second, that doesn't sound right. Let me go and look back on that. And we would find out that this is all incorrect. Everything he said so far is totally 100% incorrect. Is there any truth to it? Let's see. Let's just watch the rest of the video here.
We weren't just saying, oh, just use your intuition. Now we can assume maybe off camera he was told about these things because Luke observes the mind trick. Maybe just pick from Obi just being very observant and just observing things. He understood some of the Force. Well, if that's the case, we can assume that with Rey as well. But with Rey, it's actually even worse.
At what point can we assume that with Rey?
Because Han Solo explicitly talks about Force powers. He explicitly says, yeah, all these stories about...
I already went over why it was that we have no reason to believe that she knows any of these abilities or that she knows anything about this kind of stuff. And even if she does, she probably wouldn't have paid attention to any of it because, well, what use would having knowledge about Force techniques or the ability to be able to control minds when at the time you have no reason to believe you can even do that?
The Force, all these stories about Luke, all these stories about these amazing abilities, they're true. Now the film isn't rigorous, we could have been told more in terms of how much does Rey really know about the Force and or the Jedi. That's true, but it does seem like they have some knowledge of the Jedi, some knowledge of the Force and how it works. Remember in the original...
Giving a quote that's as vague as all hell, that doesn't give her any kind of specifics or whatever, that requires her to go back through her memory and recall specific conversations that she's probably, or at the very least maybe someone else probably tried to have with her, but she wasn't willing to listen, and therefore she believed the Jedi to be a myth because, again, what use would she have for these stories? They don't inspire her at all. So, what reason will we have to believe that this is the case? None. We have nothing.
Trilogy, it's considered a myth. Like Han Solo dismisses it in Episode 4. He thinks it's all a bunch of gobbledygook. But this is taking place decades after that. So there is some knowledge that there are these beings.
Yeah, she knows about Han Solo, but she doesn't really know much about the Jedi beyond the fact that they are a myth. Like, what, you seem to think that human beings are capable of recalling information perfectly? Like, you think that she would have heard this or heard something about it and then she would have, like, recalled it instantly without, like, realizing that, hey, I'm not going to remember any of this because it's not relevant to me. Human beings will remember things that are relevant to them, to who they are. They won't really remember aspects or elements of a story or whatever that's not relevant to them. So, I'm not sure why you're harping on this point, but it's kind of weird.
With these powers, and if she does have this power, just out of curiosity, she could have been testing herself out off camera. And again, Han Solo explicitly goes into this. With Obi-Wan, it's implicit. Maybe Luke knows about the Force.
It's backwards. You've got it backwards. In A New Hope and with Obi-Wan, it is explicit in terms of like the rule set and whatnot, and what you're able to do, even all the way up to the destruction of the Death Star. Now, in The Force Awakens, on the other hand, all of this stuff, all of the notion is being implicit in terms of its knowledge of what Rey knows, in terms of what Rey is going through, but we have no reason to know that she knows any of this stuff. We have no reason to believe that Rey has any kind of knowledge of this beyond maybe some vague stories that she may have heard that she probably didn't even pay attention to, or some specific stories that she likely got irritated with the person telling her it, and she said, I don't care about this isn't relevant to me, change the topic.
Force, maybe he doesn't, but again, from what we see in the movie, he's really puzzled. I mean, Obi-Wan just says, the Force surrounds everything, it's everywhere. And he's like, okay, well, what does that mean? It's only at the very end of the film that he uses the Force powers. But how?
No, he uses the Force powers while training, while being instructed to do so. And then he uses the Force again with a little bit of a nudge by Obi-Wan. This is getting tedious and tiresome. I'm basically at the end. I'm just going to let it play.
How much training, how much understanding he has, you have to say it's very, very minimal. But he still uses Force powers in Episode 4 and at the beginning of Episode 5. I mean, he kills off a Wampa. He's able to get the lightsaber through telekinesis. So he basically does have a huge double standard. He either has to say, you need training in all circumstances, or explain why one is the exception and why is the other a violation of canon. He never does. He just says, Rey is bad, Luke good. Luke got some training.
He does explain that. Like, that is something that he explains. Let's go and go to the video specifically. Let's see. Kylo interrogates Rey. Rey outperforms Kylo and many attempt to explain it. Okay.
About his face at all. In fact, he's not all that intimidating. of the plot, especially the First Order, since, I don't know, you could make use of your This is the third and final reference to Vader in this film, and it once again comes the center of the President's trick, goading Ben to the dark side. What sides of the Force in the galaxy managed to
trying
be
to find a
outdone
relevant
in
point here.
adds information related to the map from Kylo. For a chance to be difficult to justify that. That's just how. Of course, we aren't going to get any additional information to justify that. Writing perspective. So let's just give Rey an ability that will nail all of them in one go. Anyway, we cut to Snoke, Rey of the ability counter. And working towards something greater than the rest destructive moment for anything character or plot related is, of course, Rey defeating Kylo in the Force mind torture reading thingy. I've no idea what I'm supposed to call it, but Kylo, who has been trained by the greatest powers on both sides of the Force in the galaxy, managed to be outdone, in terms of the Force, by a person with absolutely no experience with it. It not only deals a massive blow to the importance of training and working towards something greater than yourself while putting into question the quick route to power being the dark side. It adds yet another tick to Rey's ability counter. And why? To get the plot moving. You see, we have writing problems to be solved. We need to protect the information related to the map from Kylo. We needed to reveal that Rey is significantly Force sensitive, and we need to give her a chance to escape while showing that Kylo is vulnerable. All of these things can be difficult to achieve from a writing perspective. So let's just give Rey an ability that will nail all of them in one go. Anyway, we cut to Snoke chewing out Kylo for losing a battle of the mind with Rey, and of course we aren't going to get any additional information to justify that. That's just how it be. Kylo describes Rey as untrained yet strong, and this will reflect her future performance in both TLJ and TROS, performing incredible feats in one while having been given no training aside from a singular lesson on why she shouldn't become a Jedi, and the other where we are to believe retroactive training can help make sense of the narrative.
Tomorrow, at dawn. 3 lessons.
Oh, and yes, there were supposed to be 3 lessons imparted from Luke, but we only saw 1 in action. We know one of them was sequestered to the deleted scenes.
Where's the
so
requested
what about
skinks?
the 3rd?
And I think they mentioned there's 3 lessons and people were keeping count. Wait a minute, we're missing a lesson. He says don't intervene because you're not going to be here next week when they come back and strike again, these marauders. It seems callous for him to just ignore it and not... The old Luke would be like Rey. He'd be, you know...
Another deleted scene. So it says Rey. He forgot to movie that fans can choose to interpret as...
So, yeah, there's a lot going on with this training bit here real quick in terms of what he's talking about. But basically, the gist of what he's getting at is that the film tries to engage a training scene, doesn't fully commit to it, and then does some and then Johnson does some tried and utter horseshit saying that, oh, there's a 3rd lesson that's meant to be put forth and half of a lesson that he didn't quite finish. So where are those at? And then Johnson says, oh, I put things in the movie or whatever that can have a tone in which people like can interpret their meaning of the message or instruction to Rey. Like what kind of horse shit is that? I mean, that's not good. Not good. It's not something that should be relied upon in this fashion. Didn't notice that was there. That was the, I was using that. I meant to put this into here. But, okay. So, the other thing that he gets on here that he basically, like, ends up mangling as well is the fact that, well, the reason why the training was needed at the time could be, like, what was I going with that? Let's just drop it. In fact, let's go ahead and drop this whole video here. It's going on about an hour. Only I can go ahead and turn in like a 7-minute video into an hour-long response. But yeah, there was a lot to look up to. And there was some atrocious fucking things that were said there. I'm sorry, but what the fuck are you doing making a response like this? Like, you can do better. I know you can do better. You criticized MauLer very handily with his DCU stuff. You called him out very succinctly when he was on the Heels v Babyface stuff. When it comes to Force Awakens, or specifically the sequel trilogy and the criticisms there, you seem to fall really fucking flat. I don't know why that is. I'd like to have a conversation with you on what it is your views are with the sequel trilogy, and why it is that you specifically have a problem with them, and what it is that you disagree with MauLer on. Because going through your series the way in which I've tried to do so, I find it really hard to listen to because there's just so many blatant things that you just get wrong. Not only about MauLer, but also about the sequence of events that take place that show MauLer wrong. It's just really bad. And it's really sad.